So let's bring us all back into the room. That's a little bit of a brief overview of where we are and some of the things we've seen. Love to hear a little bit more from Julie. Julie, would you like to just explain to us where you're from and what you can offer these guys and what's available to these guys in terms of grants and things?
Effectively, I work for a project called Keep Plus, which is a funding scheme to promote cooperation and collaboration between sort of academia and small businesses, small to medium-sized businesses. And to that end, we do have 4 grants on offer, which I think, rather than detail them at this point, just to say, you can go onto our website. But the premise of the funding is that if you're developing an innovative new service or product, we can potentially help fund 50% of that project. So, for example, you may have an idea that you want to develop, but you don't have the expertise to develop it. So then you would come to us for either a consultancy grant or a knowledge exchange grant, where we could put you in touch with universities who could maybe, within their departments, science and engineering or something, or the medical sciences, help you explore that idea and develop it potentially. It's a bit more complicated than that. It is EU funded. We have been running since 2016, so that gives you an idea of the climate we have been operating under, with the vote in June of that year. Hasn't affected our funding per se, and in March last year, 2 weeks before we were locked down, we got an extension of EU funding to carry on for another 2.5 years. So the project effectively goes up to the end of December 2022. And so I think Mike mentioned earlier that, we will still be receiving EU funding in the future. That's my understanding. It's in the research and innovation, or research and development sphere, if you like. My understanding is that it's the UK government that is going to be providing the funding for the future, but that, as everything else, it's still very much up in the air, hasn't been decided exactly how they're going to do it, or how much money they're going to invest, although I do know that sciences are going to be a big feature. But it is an ever-changing landscape, and at the moment it's too soon to say. But our particular funding, as I say, is ring-fenced until the end of next year. So we are operating more or less as normally as we can under the circumstances. So if if your companies, I don't know what they specialise in, but if you were thinking of diversifying or creating something new, then it would be worth having a conversation with us to see, one, if you're eligible, because there are criteria to be eligible for the funding. So under the old EU rules, you have to be registered in England, employ fewer than 249 people, not turnover more than, I think it's 50 million euros a year. And we really principally help local regions. So we have 4 sort of major areas, which is the South East, New Anglia, Norfolk, Suffolk, Cambridge and Peterborough Authority.
That's a good flavour. Thank you for that. And I do know 2 businesses in the region that I've been working with. One is a micro. They've got an R&D grant. And they're working with Reading University on a sort of like green type product and service through printing, which is quite innovative. And another business that's got a knowledge exchange grant as well. So and they're an engineering business, so it does work, and it's really good to hear Julie on there, and I want to have a conversation with Julie later.
Just to back up Julie's story, she has actually got us a grant funding offer, which we've got at the minute, which the MD's reading through, for some app development for Storm Interface.
Yeah, brilliant.
Oh,
So
great.
much appreciated, but I think that's 50% up to 25 grand spend.
That's one of our smaller grants. Yes, that's the consultancy grant, is it, that you're developing? Well, that's interesting. Yes, that'll be us.
Hey, you got a
Yeah, so
customer. No, it's good, and it is good to share
well,
this
actually,
knowledge.
we've got several hundred. To be fair, we've had an enormous amount of interest, as you can imagine, since lockdown hit, because companies are either, you know, they have the time to maybe pursue projects they didn't have time for before, and now that the landscape has changed dramatically, we have had a huge amount of interest. But it's very good to know that we are helping.
Absolutely, no, really good, Judy. Thank you for that, and thank you for coming on, because it's worthwhile, and we'll connect more afterwards as well. So that's really good. What's been your biggest EU challenge there? Sorry, Brexit challenge.
I mean, I think for us, it is a slightly looking forward thing rather than something that has already happened. The nature of arts and cultural businesses at the moment with the pandemic is, you know, we're not kind of delivering things, or at least in the way that we normally would anyway. However, the concern looking forward is primarily around movement of workers. So the arts sector does work and has traditionally worked very much on a fairly informal basis of being able to get in, you know, artists, theatre companies from Europe into the UK, and that kind of cultural exchange, and, you know, work kind of moving in the opposite direction as well. And understanding that is going to be a lot more complicated in terms of securing work visas, in terms of what kind of customs arrangements will be required for equipment for a touring company coming into the UK and going back, because even if they're not selling it, they still, you know, they still have to kind of go through customs processes in order to do that. And obviously the costs, I think, because we're very much in the planning stage, we're trying to kind of get our heads around how do you even start budgeting for that, not knowing, you know, the kind of typical costs for these things.
Certainly, the rules around that people are allowed to move around Europe, and you are allowed to move into different territories, and it's 90 days in every 180-day period.
But not working.
No, you can do essential work. You can work in that period. It's not just social and leisure. You can do some work. It's to what level can you work. So you'll find you should be able to, like touring theatre companies, people like that, as long as they're not here for more than 90 days in any 180-day period, you should be able to get temporary work permits, and whether you'll actually need actual work permits for that is debatable. It might be different for each different country, because every different country in Europe were changing their rules last year. But the agreement is trying to overcome that and try to break down some of that, so there shouldn't be the need for work permits unless they're longer term working arrangements. So that'd probably be okay. In addition to moving equipment around, I had a really interesting conversation with a business in Ely last year, just before lockdown actually. So we're talking about this time last year, who were a big events company, and they were doing just that, moving equipment across borders, and they were concerned about what the impact was going to be. Now, as I understand it, and I haven't spoken to them since, because I've been pretty much shut down since, you can still move equipment up to certain limits in value across borders without any problems. But you have to declare, I think, the value of that and what you're bringing in and taking back out again. So it's like a temporary import license that you have to buy. You'll find that for temporary working, you know, you can send workers out to Europe and work on projects for you, but as long as you comply with the local regulations. So if you say, for example, sending people to Greece, check if they need work permits, but as they will probably not need permits if they're going to be there less than 90 days in that 180-day period.
Are the rules different for temporary workers, essentially?
So if you're sending out, so me as a business consultant, I can go to Europe work with a client in Europe for a couple of days and do a
Yeah.
consultancy, that's fine. That isn't a problem.
Yeah.
But if I go out there and they want me on a project for 6 months, that's a different issue.
Okay.
And it's the same with, it's pretty much the same with providing a service. So it's exporting you're sending a group of workers. You're not sending the workers to work there. You're providing a service. So it's classed slightly differently. So,
Okay.
but it is complicated, and it will take a few months, a couple of years, probably for us to really get used to it. So, John, from your perspective, then, what are the big issues that are facing your business at the moment?
A couple of specific ones. One is on export paperwork. We have had to apply for, and we've got our own EORI number, which we stick on all the export invoices.
Yeah.
It's entirely vague from the carrier's point of view whether we've got to put our customers' EORI numbers on the export invoices that stuff going to Europe.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't want a definitive answer to that if you can get one or get one.
I would. I would ask if you're supplying B2B, I would get your customer's EORI number as well.
Yeah, but is that just a good idea, or where's the requirement come from?
Well, I thought it was a requirement, if I'm honest. I believe, as my understanding is, it's a requirement, because then when it gets into the country of, where you're delivering it to, they'll need to know where to charge any taxes to, VAT and things like that. So, and that EORI drives that. Your EORI number, if you look at it, you'll realise it's connected to your VAT number.
Yeah.
So if you've got it, it saves any delay or issues or problems at the other end. And this is what you've got to try and do, is do everything, go a bit beyond to make sure that the delivery isn't held up. What you don't want is your product getting to France and then sitting there going, well, who's it going to? What's their EORI number? How are we going to charge VAT?
Okay. Is there anything else that you're aware of that we should be putting on there apart from those 2 items?
The only other thing was, we talked about rules of origin. The sort of goods and things the sort of equipment you're making, I presume you do import some elements from.
Yeah, so this was actually my next question. I'm finding it really hard to determine where it says what the calculation is for whether it's UK origin or the origin of the part you started with. I found something that seemed to be the local content has to be more than 70% of the X-Works sale price.
Yeah.
But it was a bit vague, so I would really like a definitive figure on that.
Okay.
Because it's not quite clear whether it's the sale price or percentage of the actual cost or what.
It's different from product to product. Okay, which is
so
really
where do you
helpful.
look that up?
Right. Well, I don't look these stuff up myself.
So
I'm
where
not
can I
used to
usually
it,
look it up
but
then?
I'm assured that if you go through to your commodity codes for your product, in the information within the commodity code sections of the sites that you link to get to what your commodity code should be, it should also tell you there what your percentage input needs to be.
So on the trade tariff database then?
Yeah.
You reckon?
That's where it should be, yeah. Is it
Okay.
tariff? Is that what they call tariff?
Yeah.
So it should be there. So when you're when you create a product first, you'll go, right, I want to know what this product is. You go into tariff, you look up what your product is, it tells you a code, and it should give you all the regulations and rules around that product.
So the rules of origin is in there as well, you reckon?
It should be in there. That's what I've been told. That's what I've seen. I've been on a few rules of origin webinars recently, one with the British Chambers of Commerce and one with the Institute of Import and Export.
Yeah.
And that would be a good resource for you as well. I don't know if you're members of that. I don't know what it costs, but I'm sure it's probably quite pricey. But you can go on some of their webinars as well. They're very good, very technical. And they might be able to give you a bit more help as well. But certainly, in terms of rules of origin, you should be able to find those through the commodity codes.
Okay, we'll have a look on the trade tariff data.
It'd be worth your while connecting on the Institute of Import and Export as well, if you're not already members of that, or even connected, or look at the website, because you can get information by not being a member as well, so as a non-member.
Okay.
And they've published some of the webinars they've done on their own rules of origin as well, so it might be worth. And there was one they did the other week, which was about 45 minutes long, so not too long, but actually was really good. It was a couple of weeks ago, so have a look at that as well.
Okay.
as I say, we do offer a one-to-one service. If you want something a little bit more tailored to your business, if you want to book in with us, you can do that through our website.